Legends is a little bit of an unusual esport in the sense that we only have one big tournament that happens every single year, and that's Worlds. Every year at the end of the season, there are the World Championships where all these different teams from all these different regions finally play against each other in the big event that everyone's looking forward to. That's something that didn't actually used to be the case. We used to have a tournament circuit in Seasons 1 and Season 2. That consisted of a tournament that happened about every month or two where we would see, the Season 1 World Finals ended up happening in October or November or so. But then not that long later, in January, we would see another big international event in IEM Cologne. This was exciting because if you had a team that disappointed you and just had a poor performance at one international event, it wasn't that long until you could see them try and redeem themselves at the next one. So for example, CLG finished 5th at the first World Championship. CLG fans like myself were very sad and disappointed by that, as they performed much worse than TSM and virtually every EU team. But then when they went to the next event, IEM Cologne, they ended up performing incredibly well, beating all the other EU teams and then finally beating their rivals TSM in the grand finals to take first place. That's a really exciting thing. It gave you this sense that there was always hope for the future if you had a team that performed poorly at one event, and on top of that, it also made it so there wasn't really a clear-cut team that was the best in the world. I mean, you couldn't just say you were the best in the world because you won a single event. Maybe you had a few lucky games, maybe you got some good RNG on level 1 invades, maybe you had some crazy thing that happened where, you got to have a very easy bracket to the finals and just get to beat a team that you're always, you always have their number or something. Just because you won an international event didn't mean that you were the best in the world, because you would have to go and defend that a month later or 2 months later at the next event to really prove that it wasn't a fluke. And this was exciting. We would see all sorts of different teams that could make the argument that they were the best in the world throughout Seasons 1 and Season 2, and none of them really could hold on to that title for a while. This also made it more impressive when we finally saw dominance from Moscow 5. M5 was probably the first team that really established themselves as the clear-cut best team in the world through a spree of just winning first place at one tournament after another, after another, after another. But of course, things are different today. We just have one event, the World Championship, which is really exciting. I mean, you have this full month of competitive League of Legends being played by all sorts of teams from different regions of the world, and it can be a really enjoyable and exciting experience. However, it can also be a bit of a disappointing one. If you're a fanboy of one specific team or one specific region and they disappoint you, maybe they get knocked out of group stage, or they get 3-0'd first round of bracket, or maybe they choke or something and they don't even make it into the group stage and they get stuck in the play-in, then that can be really sad because you don't get to see them redeem themselves for a full year. If you string a couple of these bad years together, it can completely demoralize you and just kill your interest in League of Legends, competitive League of Legends. This is particularly frustrating if you care about who wins Worlds. Every single year for 5 straight years or something like that, we saw a Korean team win the World Championship, and the only time they finally ended up losing, they lost to a Chinese team who had 2 of the best Korean players that there are in the game. So I don't blame you if you've been experiencing Worlds fatigue. It's kind of set up to really pummel you and punish you if you're a fan or a super fan of like one team or one region, and that region ends up just disappointing you by not winning at all. However, there are ways that you can make things more fun. This will be my 9th World Championship that I've paid attention to, and I was someone that experienced a lot of Worlds fatigue in the earlier years, where just seeing the same teams and the same regions win over and over, and seeing my teams and my favorite storylines lose consistently, that definitely can kill your hype for the next World Championship coming around. But you just kind of have to change your mentality if you want to still enjoy the event. League of Legends isn't like a traditional sport. In traditional sports, you're taught to be a super fan of a single team, root for the team in your city or the team you've rooted for since you've been a little kid or something. You want to root and be a super fan of a team where even if they're doing badly, you're still supposed to be a fan of them. You're considered a bandwagon fan if you're hopping around from team to team and only following characters that are good. But the reason that works in traditional sports is because teams, even when they're bad, there are things to watch for. There are things to be excited and hopeful about with regards to the future and reasons to keep paying attention to a team even if they aren't doing super well. And that's not really the case in League of Legends. I mean, I've talked about those issues in a previous video. In League of Legends, things work a little bit differently. And today we're going to be giving you guys a few tips for any of you who've been experiencing Worlds fatigue or fatigue of the League of Legends esports scene in general. Here are a couple of tips to help you make Worlds a much more enjoyable experience once again. Tip number 1, pay attention to the teams, not the regions. This is one of my biggest gripes with the way that a lot of people view competitive League. A lot of people will look at a team, see what region they're from, and just assume that they're good or bad based off of that. Every NA team is bad because they're from NA. Every Korean team is good because they're from Korea. And there's no middle ground between it. They're all equally skilled. This is particularly sad because you can miss out on great storylines. For instance, if Afrika, the Afrika Freaks, if they won Worlds last year, of course they made it into the quarterfinals or semifinals and lost to Cloud9. If they were to actually win Worlds that year, that would have been an upset on the level of NA winning Worlds. I mean, that would have been insane to see. They are a team that had never won anything, and still, they've never taken first place in any event or competition they've ever participated in, not in an LCK. They haven't finished first place in a regular table. They haven't won a playoff. They never have been able to run the gauntlet and win in the gauntlet to qualify for a Worlds. The highest they've ever been able to place for anything is second place. And for them to go and win Worlds as their first knockout competition they won, that would have been an insane storyline. And it also would have been a complete shame if people were thinking, that's no big deal. They're a Korean team. Koreans are expected to win Worlds. The best advice I can give to you guys is make sure you don't make that assumption because you will miss out on some really big and really exciting storylines. For instance, Griffin and Damwon this year are very exciting to see what they're going to be able to do. Both teams are very new. I think Damwon has only played in 2 LCK splits since winning promotion, and Griffin has only played in 3. Both teams have never won anything. Griffin has finished first place in 2 or 3 of the LCK splits they've played in the regular season, but they have lost all 3 of the grand finals in the playoffs that they've made it to. How cool would it be if they were able to win Worlds as their first knockout win ever in anything, ever? That's so cool. SKT, the 3rd Korean team, have been atrocious for like a full year or 2-year stretch. I mean, they were failing to even make the playoffs of LCK until this past year where they bought all these great players, constructed a super team. They finally look like they're the SKT of old, where they're looking dominant, looking incredible. Could they be the team that goes and brings the title back to Korea when China has seemed so dominant and has appeared to be favorites? Make sure you're paying attention to these storylines because these are sometimes way more exciting and interesting to pay attention to, and you shouldn't stop watching just because, maybe your team that you're rooting for ends up getting knocked out earlier than you expected in groups or in the first round of bracket or something. You should still be watching and paying attention because these storylines are so interesting and often very exciting. Tip number 2, if you want to pay attention to rivalries between teams or between regions, make sure you're paying attention to the head-to-head games and don't do that thing where you just look and see who makes it further in the bracket. In my opinion, this is a bit of a mistake for a couple of reasons. The first of which being, you're not getting exciting games to watch. You can pay attention to see who makes it further without actually watching the games, just seeing, you wake up and you see that this team that you hate ended up getting knocked out in quarterfinals. Oh, that's great. My team has made it further. It's much more exciting if you actually watch the head-to-head because firstly, that's a better measure of skill, and secondly, that will give you games to watch. EU versus NA is one of the oldest and most historic rivalries in League of Legends, and it's also one of the closest. It's a really close rivalry if you look at the head-to-head matches and see the overall record between the regions. So if that's something that you care about, pay attention to it. Same deal for China versus Korea. Same deal for LMS versus Southeast Asia. Same deal for if you want to pay attention to, Vietnam versus EU is a small rivalry, but it's actually really close. The point being, though, pay attention to the head-to-head games. Don't just look and see who makes it further in the bracket. Those games are going to be way more exciting than the small thrill that you see of waking up to see in the morning, oh, this team got knocked out. Oh, yeah, That's awesome. Woo. That's a pretty bad way to measure skill anyway. Pay attention to the head-to-head. Don't look at who avoids the tougher opponents for longer in the tournament before they eventually get knocked out. Tip number 3 I would suggest, though, don't pay attention to the rivalries. Pay attention to the underdogs. Always root for the underdogs, whoever it is. Just look at the underdog games, and I would suggest the more lopsided a game is predicted to be, the more you should try and watch it. The reason for this is because League of Legends is already a game where comebacks are very rare, and it's a tough thing for an underdog to beat a team that's better than them. In traditional sports, there is never a circumstance where a team is given an advantage because they're better other than that advantage. Like if you're playing a soccer match, a football match, a basketball game or whatever, and the other team is stronger than you, taller than you, faster than you, then they have that advantage, but they don't get any sort of additional advantage in the game through scoring points or anything. You know what I mean? In League of Legends, if you are a better team and you're able to get kills, then you get more gold, you get more items, you get more levels, you get an even stronger team that is then given an even easier path to beating your opponent and just crushing them. And this makes, comebacks in particular, very difficult to do, but it also just kind of hurts underdogs' chances of being able to beat a team that's better than them. Now, in my opinion, I would suggest you watch these games that are predicted to be blowouts, firstly because it will give you a good understanding of, wow, it's insane how good SKT is when they're able to beat a wild card or whoever and just wipe the floor with them, 25 kills to 1, taking every single tower they have and not losing a single one. It'll really let you know how lopsided League of Legends can be. On top of that, though, it will also make the comebacks and the upsets that do happen all the more exciting because you'll have an understanding of how hard and impossible that feels for an underdog to actually beat a team that's so much better than them. But it's also something that happens all the time. In group stage, at least, it will happen very frequently because we're only playing best of 1 games. And it's, there have been so many circumstances in the past where the group stages have just been an absolute mess of teams that have been so impressive and exciting and fun to watch. Whether it's a wild card that's beating a Korean team or it's EU or NA surprisingly getting out of the group of death that they were predicted to just get trashed in, there are still exciting matches like that happen, and it's really important for you to both watch them live, because that's way more exciting than watching a VOD or just looking at the result, and it's also more exciting for you to actually have an understanding of how rare and impressive that is for a less skilled team to beat someone better than them. At the end of the day, League of Legends is a game that lends itself to seeing dynasties, whether it's seeing Team Liquid win 4 LCS splits in a row, or G2 consistently beating everybody in EU, or, Korea consistently winning Worlds. It's gonna happen. And as exciting as it is, the thought of maybe G2 being able to win Worlds or a Western team like Fnatic finally making it to Grand Finals and not getting 0-3'd by a team from the East, it's something that's also kind of likely to happen again as it has the past 6 years. But it's still an incredibly and exciting thing to watch if you're paying attention to the storylines. Don't just think that all Korean teams are the same and that just because the favorites or the favorited region ends up winning Worlds, don't think that means Worlds is a boring event. If you're paying attention to all the little intricacies that go on, then it can still be a really exciting and really fun thing for you to follow. But anyway, those are just my opinions. You guys can, of course, disagree with them and yell at me in the comments down below. Tell me how I'm an idiot for not being so self-assured that G2 is going to win this Worlds. I would absolutely love to see it, but convince me that it's going to happen. Actually, if you guys are from a region that is outside of EU and NA, let me know what storylines I should be paying attention to. I'm not really up to date on all of the different storylines outside of Korea, NA, and EU that I should be paying attention to going on this Worlds. Let me know if there's something exciting that I should keep my eyes on, and I would love to follow it. But on that note, I hope you guys all enjoyed watching today's video. I will see you in the next one. Until then, thank you very much for watching. Good luck in solo queue, and have a wonderful day.